we were down by 3 touchdowns with 7 minutes to go. So like we're down by 21 points and I was just walking up and down the sidelines. All right, how fast? That fast. We talk about how we can change momentum that fast, and we snap my fingers. And so
Hey everybody, welcome to the Live Your Legacy podcast. The goal of our show is to help you live your own legacy by connecting you to people and concepts that have made a tremendous impact on the lives of others so that you can make that 1 degree shift in your life. Today's guest is a CEO of Mentally Strong Consulting and the author of Beyond Grit. She has a Ph.D. in sport and performance psychology and is a leader in her field, serving 3 years on the executive board of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. She is also the professor and directs the Sport and Exercise Psychology graduate program at Minnesota State University, Mankato. For the past 7 years, she has worked on mental training with the Minnesota State Maverick Football and actually pushed them through 6 undefeated regular seasons and the number 1 in national rankings. In 2013, she founded and still directs the Center for Sport and Performance Psychology, which is one of the few centers in the country that helps graduate students gain certification hours. Introducing to you the woman who will help you master your own level of performance, Cindra Kamphoff. Welcome to the show.
well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Okay, let's jump in straight away to high performance. And you actually state this, one of the habits that high performance individuals have in your book, Beyond Grit, is the ability to master their thoughts. So what is needed for us to gain control of our thoughts?
Well, first of all, I would describe it as one of the core principles of just reaching our potential in general is we have to know what to do with our self-talk. And what the research shows is we have between like 60 and 80,000 thoughts in one day. So our mind is constantly going, but we also have a negativity bias as humans. And so what that means is negative events get stored more quickly to our long-term memory and they linger longer. So we really need to train it, because if we don't, we continue to find the negative or what's wrong with the situation instead of what's right. And to really be at our best, we have to not believe everything we think because we do have automatic negative thoughts, and we really have to be intentional with our self-talk, with what we're saying to ourselves. So I have something I call the truth meter, and it goes like this. When you start questioning or may have a negative thought or a disempowering thought, first ask yourself, is this thought true? And usually our thoughts are not always true, right? Our mind is here to keep us safe, not necessarily help us be a high performer. That's why we're programmed for the negativity. And so is this thought true? If it's not true, ask yourself, is this thought serving me? So is it helping me? Is it helping me reach my highest potential? And then if it is not helping you, you can choose a different thought. And our attention is like a spotlight. And what I mean by that is our attention is sort of like, when you're kind of going into a cave or you have like a light on your head, maybe when it's dark, your light is always shining on something. And so your attention is always shining on something. It's really just about, is it shining on the thing that's really going to help you and help you reach your potential?
Now, you mentioned about like negative thoughts, right? I think a lot of our thought processes are usually hijacked or influenced by our external influences, basically things that we consume on a daily basis. So how do we become aware of like these external influences that are basically hijacking our thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first step of really mastering your mind and being a high performer is awareness. And so what to me that means is just like being aware, being a silent observer to your thoughts and your emotions. One of the ways that you can practice this is what's called mindfulness, which mindfulness, I'm going to use a guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn. Maybe you've heard of his work, but he describes mindfulness as just being in the present moment, as if your life depended on it, non-judgmentally. And what that really means is that we're not judging ourselves, but we're just noticing our thoughts and noticing our emotions. And when we do that, we can put some space between, really how we respond and then, our thoughts and our emotions. So I think that's powerful to know that you can train your mind. Darius, I was reading a study the other day in the Harvard Business Review. So the study in the Harvard Business Review found that 47% of the time, our mind is not in the present. And so our mind can be in the future or in the past instead of really fully focused on what we're doing. And to really be aware of what's happening, be a high performer, you do need to pay attention to what's happening in the moment.
Okay, and so how do we go about being in the moment, since you have now mentioned about most of the time we aren't in the moment, we're probably thinking about the future, worrying about something else in the past or the future, right? So how do we start to be present in the moment?
Well, I think it's something that we can train. And what it comes down to is how I would describe it is awareness first and a choice second. And so what I mean by that is just awareness of where your mind is, and then a choice to bring it back to the present. And I think the more and more you do that, the more you're able to be in the present moment. Kind of owning the moment is one of the practices I talk about in Beyond Grit, that high performers are really able to master the moment. They're able to be fully in the here and the now. And you might be able to bring your attention back to the moment with, like, let's say your breath or a deep breath, because your breath you always have with you, right? Like, as long as you're alive, you have the breath. So just taking a deep breath, getting it to in the present. But what happens is we miss these really important moments in our life, maybe with our family or even at our work, and we can't fully be at our best if we don't spend the majority of the time in the present moment.
Okay, now that you have, I love what you said about, if we don't spend time with ourselves now, then we pretty much won't be able to spend time in the future as well. So another principle of high performance that you have seen in your book is the ability to master oneself. And it's something very interesting because a lot of people always talk about mastering yourself, but there's so many things to master. You can't just like put it up there and say like, hey, you gotta master yourself. And I'll be like, okay, so how do I go about doing that? Right. So through your years of research that you have done, do break down to us like what are the components that we need to focus on in order to start mastering ourselves.
Sure. So first of all, I think about leadership in two ways, right? Like, we all lead somebody, but for us to lead other people, we first have to lead ourselves. And lead yourself really means to me that you know what you want, and you know how to get there, and you can break that goal down into small steps. But mastering yourself really means that you have the mental tools and strategies to be able to kind of be in charge of your own life and being able to master those thoughts and emotions. I'm going to describe that there's three components of knowing yourself and understanding yourself. First, it is awareness. So it's about just being a silent observer to your mind and your emotions and your thoughts. Second is, we can talk a bit more about this, is your purpose. And I think finding your purpose is a lifelong journey. I can talk a little bit about how I found mine and how I help other people find theirs. But purpose, like, why are you here on this earth, and what lights a fire in your belly? And then number three is this concept of emotional agility. And it comes from a woman, her name is Susan David, and she's a psychologist. And she has this great book and a TED Talk on emotional agility. And really what she says is when we're experiencing emotions, what's helpful is if we label that emotion, and we don't necessarily believe that we are the emotion. We might even just say, I'm noticing that I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Kind of distance ourselves from that emotion, but ask ourselves what led to that emotion. So, I think really right now, with all the things that are happening in the world with COVID-19, right, there's can be a lot of frustration and anger. And so for me, I was consuming a lot of news when I first learned about this. And I was feeling a lot of fear and anxiety and, gosh, just overwhelm. And I had to take a step back and just ask myself, what led to me feeling this way right now? Oh, I'm consuming all of this news. Okay, let's turn this off and let's get focused more on my purpose and, what I'm really called here to do. So I'd say, three components of knowing yourself is like awareness, purpose, and then being able to understand, regulate your emotions. And this concept of emotional agility is really powerful.
And I actually really love the idea of emotional agility as well. Just to touch upon that point, is like what you said, right? Is distancing yourself away from the emotion, is disassociating yourself from the emotion. And because I think the main difficulty that most people have is that they don't really know how to describe their emotions. Sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm feeling like, I'm not sure how to describe that. But I realize once we start describing our emotions, then we really understand like, hey, this is actually how I feel, rather than just going like, this is rage or fury or whatever it is, right? So let's go back to the point on purpose. And that's a really tricky question because some people search their whole life for their purpose, but they aren't able to find them as well. So walk us through how you actually found your purpose. And yeah.
So I actually found my purpose through running a marathon. So it's one of the things I like to do is I like to run, and I was running the Boston Marathon in 2013. And if people, I know people are listening all over the world to this interview, and so the Boston Marathon is one of the top 5 marathons in the world. You have to qualify for it, and it's also a really difficult course. So it's 26.2 miles of course, but you run like 13 miles downhill. Okay, that sounds awesome because you're running downhill, but it's really hard because your quads just take a beating all the way downhill, and then you have to run like 5 miles. So what's the top of mile 21 is called the Heartbreak Hill. And it's called that because literally it's like these 5 miles, and it breaks your heart because you've been training really hard, and then you find yourself walking up this hill. And so this particular year I ran a personal best at the Boston Marathon, which is really hard to do because I live in Minnesota in the United States, and so it is cold here in the winter. So we have to train in the snow or on the treadmill, and then the course is just really difficult. So I was so happy on cloud 9, and was down at the finish line, and waiting for my friends to finish, and heard some loud noises, made my way to my hotel room, which was right next to the finish line. And if you recall, what happened was 2 people, like in backpacks, put 2 bombs by the finish line. And so we had heard there were multiple bombs along the course, and maybe perhaps there was even a bomb in our hotel because that's where we were, right at the finish line. So it was really scary. I think for me, once we found out there was not a bomb in our hotel, for me, I just remember sitting there really quietly in our hotel room, and we were all gathered together, and there wasn't really much to say. We weren't talking about our race. In fact, that really didn't matter. And what mattered most was my family was number one. Would I be able to see my kids again? And number 2 was like my passion and my purpose. And I remember asking myself, what difference do I make, and why do I do what I do, and why am I here, and what difference do I make? So, after that day in 2013, I'd have to say I was playing pretty small in my life, like just kind of going through the motions, and not really getting out there with my message, not speaking. Since then, I have provided mental training or, peak performance strategies to the Minnesota Vikings, which is an NFL team here in the US. So, just was able to, I wouldn't have written my book if it wasn't for me being at the race. So, and what's really interesting is adults, when they're asked like what was the most important day in their life, they typically describe a day that they had to overcome significant adversity. So we can find purpose in really difficult moments. That doesn't have to come from difficult moments, but finding our purpose is a lifelong journey. But we also know from the research that when you are connected to your purpose, you live up to 7 to 10 years longer, and it's connected to longevity and happiness and health. So I interviewed a guy when I came back from the Boston Marathon. I read a book called The Power of Purpose by a guy named Richard Leiter. And because I was trying to find all about my purpose, I just had him on my podcast, which is called the High Performance Mindset Podcast. It's episode 333. So 333, I'd love for people to listen to it because it was an incredible conversation. There's a lot of different strategies we talked about like how to find your purpose and how to connect with it. I have a good, amazing strategy in my book, Beyond Grit, where I help you write your purpose statement and help you really consider what your why is. But I do think it takes a lot of reflection and really awareness and just first this like decision that you want to seek it out and get more clarity on your purpose.
Okay, I think now that we talk about purpose, and if people want to know more about purpose, they can head over to your podcast, episode 333, right? Easy to remember.
Yeah.
And so, how do we intentionally, now we know we got awareness, we have purpose, and then we got emotional agility, right? That's how we kind of break down in terms of the components of mastering ourselves. How do we intentionally design our lives in order to deliver the highest performance that we can, right? Because we're still on the whole topic of mastering ourselves, but how do we design our life around it?
Yeah, great question. So first, I would ask you to think about what do you really, 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 really want? And to be honest, many people really they don't have clarity on what they want. They haven't really spent time thinking about what they want. And so, but I think that's the first step in like intentionally designing your life is what really do you want? What are some goals, long-term goals that you're going after? So this idea of grit means having passion and purpose for our very long-term goals. And I use that definition by a woman named Angela Duckworth. And all of her research shows that, you know, gritty people are higher in sales. They're more committed as an entrepreneur. They perform more consistently. And grit is powered by our passion and our purpose and hope and optimism and confidence. So we can actually become grittier. It's something that we can develop. But I think the first step is what are some goals you're going after? And then breaking those down into, okay, what do I have to do today or this month to really get to those goals? And those goals can be really frustrating because many of our goals are outside of our control. And so we have to also know when to focus on specific goals and when not to. So like as an athlete or a team I'm working with, you know, they might say, we want to win the national championship. Well, guess what? You shouldn't be focused on the national championship right before game 2 of the season. You think about those long-term outcome goals, like to get you motivated and get you excited, but we also have to be able to shift our attention to when is it helpful to think about more of these outcome goals versus these small process goals of things that we can control. So first step in designing your life is asking yourself, what do you want? And I think our desires change throughout our life, and that's okay. I have my goals right behind me. I have like my 20-year, 10-year, 5-year, 1-year goals written out. And there's a lot of power in writing your goals out because then you commit to them and you can hold yourself accountable. So I have an awesome exercise in my book that helps you really think about what is it that you want, like 20, 10, 5 years from now, and then what do you want 1 year from now?
Okay, and I really like when you said, like, this is something that I think is not enough people talk about this, is when you said the line of there is a right time to go for outcome goals, and then there's a right time for process goals as well. And then sometimes we are actually setting the wrong goal, even though we think we are really ambitious. It's not at the right time. I really like the word that you say, it's not at the right time. So walk us through, like, when are the right time for us to set our outcome goals? When are the right time to set our process goals? Because most of us really just set goals and we're like, okay, we're going to achieve it and we must achieve it. And then we end up not achieving it, right? Because sometimes it's way beyond what we can actually cope, but we still decide to go ahead with it because they said that to set a goal is to be ambitious, is to be driven towards it.
Right. Yeah, so I don't think we're really taught how to focus on goals and what type of goals you can have. So I'll just kind of simply describe there are goals outside of our control that we can set, right? That would be more of a considered like an outcome goal. Like I have a grit board right over there in my office, and I have 4 1-year goals. Some of those goals are outside of my control, but some of them are in my control. And so I think first of all, I need to every single day look at where I'm going. But sometimes when I look at that outcome goal, so I just kind of check in with it every morning. Okay, where am I going? And kind of long term, I also have some whys underneath each of these goals. And it's, I think our why, our purpose needs to be connected to other people, not just ourselves. So I do have some whys that if I need to look at that to motivate me, I can. But then, besides checking in with it can actually cause some anxiety for me. When I look at this and I think, oh gosh, it's June and now COVID hit and I'm trying to pivot and adjust my goals because, things are changing and goals are meant to be adjusted. So I used to think when I set a goal, I should never change it. But there are things that happen, right? So we can also change our goals even though we write them down. So sometimes our outcome goals can feel like a lot of pressure or anxiety provoking. So just pay attention to what gives you energy. If you're an athlete, you don't want to focus on an outcome goal, I'd say at least 24 hours before a competition, because you don't want to be thinking about winning, right? Because then that takes your attention away from the process or the small things you have to do. So instead, you just want to focus on, okay, what are the things I need to execute in this game? Or for me, it might be, or for those people who are like business leaders or entrepreneurs, right? It's like, what do I need to do today that I can control that leads me to that outcome goal?
Oh, that's actually very interesting. I always thought that, like, for athletes, what they should be going for is like winning the game, gotta win, gotta win, gotta win. But when you actually break it down like that, then it actually makes sense, because winning is for them, athletes, winning for them is more of an outcome goal. And
Yes.
focusing on the process, whatever tactics or strategies that they have to implement during the game, is more of the process goals. Which,
Yeah.
yeah, I just realized, like, wow, okay, this is something pretty new that I thought about it. Like, oh yeah, they are actually outcome and process goals as well. So
Yeah, I wish I would have known this as an athlete. I didn't, so there were multiple times I did not perform my best, but I can just watch athletes and you can start telling when all of a sudden they're focusing on the outcome, because they get glassy eyes, they're like deer in the headlights, and you can tell that they start tensing up. So one of the football teams I work with, I'm on the sidelines of their games. And I'm telling them, I go up and down, the sidelines when I notice them focusing on the outcome. And it's like, okay, let's focus on one play at a time, right? The things that we can control right here, right now. And that connects me back to what I was saying earlier, that, 47% of our time, we're not even in the present moment. So we have to train ourselves to really stay focused on the present and more on this process, the small things we can control day to day.
now let's talk more about, since we're on the topic where you talk about you're working on your mental training along with and high performance with the Minnesota State Maverick Football, right? Do
Yes.
walk us through some of your strategies that really work well in terms of performance for your athletes, like maybe your top 2 or 3.
Top 2 or 3. Okay. So, okay, top 2 or 3.
And maybe like the top, okay, maybe not top 2 to 3. Maybe it's fine if you just say one of it, and more of mastering their ability to control, right? Since we're on this whole part of controlling.
So what I really love to work with football teams on is energy. And we talk about this idea of like psychological momentum. And what it means is our ability to shift the momentum of the game really by our mindset or our psychology. And this team I worked with, I started working with about 9 years ago. And I started reading all about psychological momentum my first season. And we talked about it. We have a workshop regularly, like a mental training workshop. And we talked about how we can shift the momentum of the game by shifting the wave. Okay, so it stands for this. It means like waking up to our energy. just noticing our energy. That's the W. The A stands for changing our actions. So we might like high five somebody or pat each other on the back, right? To kind of give each other some momentum or energy. V stands for our voice. And just by, cheering for a guy or say, hey, I see you, number 23. That's what they might say, right? By waking up our voice, that also creates like a momentum change. And, momentum change in sports is sort of like when you kind of feel like the other team has the momentum, right? It's can't really put your finger on it, but it's just more of a feeling. And it's intimidating when another team has momentum. So we can shift it. And then the E stands really for your emotions and dialing those up, paying attention to how you're feeling. And if you're feeling nervous or anxious, that's okay, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act nervous or anxious. Like you can act independent of how you feel. So sometimes athletes will say, well, I don't feel very confident. Well, just because you don't feel very confident doesn't mean that that impact what you do. You can still act confidently. And sometimes we have to really act independent of how we feel. And sometimes a little nervousness is okay because that helps us, kind of shows us that we're ready. So WAVE, wake up, your actions, your voice, and then your emotions. And that's so fun because I remember, the first season I implemented this with them. It was just like, I couldn't believe it because we started like changing the momentum and we were down by 3 touchdowns with 7 minutes to go. So like we're down by 21 points and, I was just walking up and down the sidelines. All right, let's, how fast? That fast. We talk about how we can change momentum that fast and we snap my fingers. And then we just started doing it and we won the game. So it was really fun to kind of see it happen. So that's at least one strategy I would describe.
Okay, great. Thanks for actually uncovering some of your secret stuff, some of your secret stuff that you work on football teams, and hopefully none of them copy yours. Or more like I think if you watch sports, you can really, I think that word that you use, momentum's, what's it called? Momentum psychology, is it?
Psychological momentum.
Yeah, okay. So psychological momentum. I think that's something, now that you have stated it out, because it's a term that I didn't really hear before. And when you state up psychological momentum, then I really think about it. Yeah, I think that's how like teams get into the flow, right? They talk about the flow state. Right? I think that's how they go in the flow because they start building up. And it's not suddenly like a burst where it's suddenly like a domination. It's like a build up but a lot of times people don't really see that psychological build up. Right. So I think it's really interesting that you share with us this. So what do you specifically do? You talk about increasing the performance of the football teams, but what do you specifically do to increase your own level of performance?
Oh, great question. So one of the strategies I'd love to describe is what I call my grit morning routine. And it's really about priming yourself to have great emotions and thoughts for your day. And people can download it by going to beyondgrit.com/morning. So beyondgrit.com/morning.
I'll put the links below.
Okay, perfect. And this is what it is. And sometimes I do it while I'm exercising and then I'm even more on fire because I've got, endorphins running through my body and then I've primed my emotions and my thoughts to really help me throughout my day. And I think the reason you really want to do this is what we were talking about earlier about like this negativity bias and how we're programmed to see what's wrong, not what's right. So the 4 components are GRIT, okay? And I'm going to encourage people to at least do each of these 4 for at least 1 minute each. Right? I want to make it really practical and simple for people to use. And it's more of like less about like a doing routine, but more about like a psychological routine, right? So if people like meditate in the morning or exercise, you can do this in addition to that. You can also do it as you wake up in your bed and you're laying in your bed, you can do these 4 steps. So for at least 1 minute each. G stands for gratitude. And that means like for 1 minute, think about all the things that you're grateful for. The great things, the tough things, the big things, the small things. R stands for remember your why or your purpose. And so for at least 1 minute, remind yourself why you do what you do. What's your purpose? What do you think your calling is? And imagine the people that you impact and the people that you serve, and just by living that purpose. I stands for intention. And intention is more about who you want to be than what you want to do that day. So, and I use an I will statement, and I set at least 3 intentions for my day. So it might be like, I will boldly lead my team today, or I will be on task with my time, or I was going to my son's basketball game a few months ago, and I was like, that morning I was like, I will be fully present at my son's game today. Okay, so put the phone away, was fully there, and he noticed. So intention, I will. And then T stands for talk to yourself. And this is what we know about the research is that if you have statements that are pre-planned, right? This is for an athlete especially. But if you have thoughts that you want to think to yourself, like pre-planning your thoughts before your performance actually helps you, give you more confidence and gives you a strategy to be able to think more powerfully. So we want to do the same in our morning. I have 30 statements I say to myself every single morning, and to help me really step into who I want to become more of. And because what I think about myself, I become, right? Just like what you think about yourself, you become. So some of my talk to yourself statements are like, I am bold, I'm courageous. I know my value and the value of my work to this world. I learn like I change 1 million people's lives, right? So, and then I repeat my purpose. So I think like just planning out your thoughts and priming yourself with that in the morning can be incredibly powerful, because what you put in here is who you end up becoming. And this right here shapes your identity and how you show up in your day.
I think that's an interesting point to take note, especially the last part, because I want you to take note for people who are listening to this. I think the worst thing to do in the morning is to wake up and then check your phone, because instantly you're primed to whatever that's happening in the past. Because of the notifications that's coming in, you start living in the past when you start your day. So I really love how you shared gratitude, remember your why, intention, and then end off with talk to yourself, which is something very interesting, because I didn't really thought of like talking to myself. I do gratitude. I know I start with intention every day, and I know what's my why. And I write it down. I think that's something very effective as well. And then you mentioned about this whole thing of talking to yourself. So what exactly, I would really love to know, what exactly do you talk to yourself? Since you have already done gratitude, know your why, and knowing your intention as well. So what do you actually talk to yourself in the morning?
Yeah. So, and if people are thinking about what should I say to myself, I think that really the question to ask yourself is, what do you need to believe about yourself to achieve your goals or your vision? So what do you need to believe about yourself to accomplish your goals and your vision? And then write those out. You could write them. So on this PDF that you can download again at beyondgrit.com/morning, I give you some prompts. And one prompt might be like, every day in every way, I'm getting stronger and stronger. Right? So every day in every way might be a prompt, or I will, or I can, or I am is a prompt. And I am is so powerful because that's who you are and that's your identity. And sometimes we forget who we are, right? It's like our negativity and our bias and these lies we tell ourselves, we forget who we are, and we forget the accomplishments and what we've done in the past to really help us build our confidence. So those are a few statements that you could start with. So think about, what do you need to believe about yourself to achieve your goals and your vision? And since I've been doing this in January, I feel like my first statement on my list is, I know my value and the value of my work to this world. And I have to say, like in January, that was something I was really working on, just kind of like seeing my value. I know my value now, so it's sort of like by telling myself that every day, 6 months later, it starts becoming who I am, and just part of my really subconscious, so that it's like, this is kind of just my it's like not my conscious, it's like how do I explain it? Like the default that my brain is going to.
Unconsciously,
So,
right?
yeah, what'd you say?
Unconsciously. Basically, it's
Yes,
now your
absolutely.
unconscious mind just doing it like a daily routine, and it becomes naturally yourself.
Yes, it becomes who I am. And I think that's the power of being really intentional with what you say in the morning and planning it out, thinking about what do you need to believe about yourself to achieve your goals. And your goals should be scary. And what I mean by that is they should be just a little out of your reach. When you look at them, you should say, I don't know, maybe I can't do it. And that seems like, well, I got to work really hard to get there. Good. You know, I love this quote by Donna Williams, and she says, like, your dream should just be a little bit scary because that's how you grow and who you become, how you be, you know, what you become into. So my goals are pretty aggressive. And so I know that, you know, I really have to believe these certain things about myself, like that I am bold and I'm courageous and I'm beautiful and I am enough. Those are some things that I might say to myself to help me step into who I need to become.
Okay, really lovely. I really love all these strategies that you're going really in depth in throughout this whole podcast. So before I ask my last question, where can we connect and learn more from you?
Sure, you can head over to my website, and it's Dr. Cindra, so DrCindra.com. And you can find, I have a Beyond Grid Academy, so you can learn more about if you want to watch some videos and have something to go through. You get a book and a workbook with the Academy, so you get some guidance on like how to master your mindset more and how to set goals and practice everything that we talked about today. And if you want to learn more about the podcast, the High Performance Mindset Podcast, you can get all the episodes on my website at Dr. Cindra, or you can just subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this, right? I have like 350 episodes at this point. Started it in 2015, over 1 million downloads. So, you know, and really get to, just like you, interview some amazing people about mindset. And it's really all about mindset.
Really great. Okay, so what does living a legacy means to you?
That is a great question and a heavy question. Living a legacy means to me is really living my purpose. And the purpose of my life is to be authentic and passionate and live in the service of others and really help people play big, right? Play big means, you know, play big in sports, but also play big in their life and in their business. And that's what living a legacy means to me, is knowing what my purpose is and every day working to live it and positively impact as many people that I possibly can with the gifts that I have. And I think about purpose as like all of us has a unique gift and unique experiences and a unique calling and a unique reason why we're on this planet. And when we connect with that, that's what it means to live a legacy, is to really live on purpose with purpose.
Okay, thanks for being on the show, Cindra. And this lady has really dropped some bombs and dropped some knowledge bombs in here, because like there are a few concepts that I really learned about, things like psychological momentum and like your whole wave thing that you did as well, and your whole grit and talking to yourself. There are so many new concepts that I would even want to apply in my life, especially start with talking to myself more often, right?
Yes.
So thanks for really being on the podcast, Cindra. It's a privilege to
Yeah.
have you on your podcast to share with us your in-depth knowledge in high performance. And for those who are listening, if you enjoyed the podcast, do make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on what your biggest takeaways are, because I'm always looking for them. So if you really want to learn more about her, go to the website. Down below, the links are there, and go and grab her morning on what you should be doing at beyondgrid.com/morning. So until the next episode, start living your legacy, my friends.